Alright everyone, it's been a while since I made a Tekken video, so I think it's time I return to this series to milk it for all it's worth. Previously, I've released videos covering Tekken 1 and 2, and as I possess the ability to count, contrary to popular belief, I think it's time to cover Tekken 3. Released in arcades in 1997 and then on the PS1 in 1998, it goes without saying that Tekken 3 is, well, a classic. You know it, I know it, even this monkey peeing into his own mouth knows it. Tekken 3 is a beloved classic fighting game, and it's arguably the best game on the PS1, coming second only to Kiss Pinball. Most people agree that it's up there with Tekken 5 in terms of quality Tekken games, and it's very hard to find someone who doesn't love this game, especially if they grew up in the late 90s. I personally see the Tekken series as having three distinct periods. Tekken 1 and 2 represent the humble beginnings of the series, Tekken 6 through to 8 represent the anime aggression era, but Tekken 3 through to 5 is what I call the peak era, where the games had a perfect mix of offense, defense, and pretty much everything else. It must be said that while the previous games released to critical and commercial success, as I mentioned in my Tekken 2 video, go watch that, Tekken 3 took this series to new heights, solidifying it as a household name for people all around the world. We have a lot to cover, from Tekken 3's gameplay, storyline, reception, legacy, and more. I will leave no stone unturned. Sit your butt down, grab some popcorn, and get ready to kill your grandson, because we're going to jump into the world of Tekken 3. Before we cover the development of Tekken 3, let's have a story recap so we can all be on the same page. 15 years after the previous game, series antagonist Heihachi Mishima creates the Tekken Force, which is a paramilitary group committed to protecting the Mishima Zaibatsu. During an excavation project in Mexico, the Tekken Force searched through an ancient temple and are quickly struck down by a mysterious green figure known only as Ogre. After learning of this incident, Heihachi wishes to locate and kidnap Ogre, hoping to acquire its terrifying powers for his own personal gain. Shortly after this, underrated waifu and star of that piece of shit PS2 game Nina Williams wakes up from her 15-year-long cryosleep forced onto her by the one and only Dr. Boskonovich, so now she's back in the game. Taking another detour, let's meet the brand new character Jin Kazama, a 14-year-old who lives in Yakushima with Jun Kazama after his bastard father Kazuya Mishima left them to go buy milk. Everything is going great for these two, until Jun senses Ogre's aura and realizes that she is Ogre's next target. Jun then tells Jin to find Heihachi if anything were to happen to her, and shortly after Jin turns 15, Ogre attacks. After having his house burnt down and his mum seemingly killed, Jin, much like baby Kazuya in the first game, is confronted by the devil who brands his left arm with the mark of the devil gene. Following Jun's advice, Jin finds Heihachi in a Japanese hot spring, explaining the situation and begging the old man to train him. Heihachi agrees, and he sends Jin off to Mishima High School to get a degree in Taylor Swift studies. Yes, this is a real thing. There, he meets Ling Xiaoyu and Panda, as well as Harurang, who he meets for the first time during a street fight. Now that Jin has settled into his new life as a high school student, where he meets a chatty girl, a rowdy guy, and an animal mascot character, 4 years pass and Jin has now mastered the art of the Mishima karate style. Heihachi then announces the King of Iron Fist Tournament 3 on Jin's 19th birthday, and in a twist of fate, it turns out that Heihachi was training Jin specifically so that he could use him to lure out Ogre. I gotta say, waiting patiently for 15 years is pretty impressive, so good job Heihachi. Anywho, going back to Nina for a moment. After waking up from her cryosleep, it turns out that she is suffering from amnesia and is now being controlled by Ogre. Sensing that Jin is a threat, Ogre commands Nina to kill Jin if they ever cross paths. After this, the King of Iron Fist Tournament 3 begins, and eventually Jin and Nina battle it out. Nina, still cold and kinda wet from being underwater for 15 years, loses to Jin, which frees her from Ogre's control. While Jin and Nina are having their time together, fan favorite Paul Phoenix is also demolishing his way through the bracket, and he even eliminates Jin. Paul then stumbles across the same temple that the Tekken Force did at the start of this recap. Running into Ogre, this muscle-bound American beast of a man one-shots him and walks away, believing that he has won. But, and this has never happened in a Japanese fighting game before, but after being defeated, the final boss gets up and transforms into an even stronger form. No one could have predicted this, and as such, the tournament organizers, who may or may not be paid off by Heihachi, reinstate Jin into the bracket and allow the tournament to keep going. Jin then confronts True Ogre, and after years of hard work and training, he manages to defeat the beast, avenging Jun and winning the tournament. While celebrating at Denny's right after, Heihachi storms in and executes Jin via a firing squad, finishing him off himself. Normally, this would have been a fatal injury, but because Jin has anime plot armor, his devil powers resurrect him. After growing black wings and developing a really unhealthy obsession with Bring Me the Horizon, Jin flies away to an unknown location, ending the story, at least for now. To bring this game to life, Namco decided to create Tekken 3 on the Namco System 12 arcade board, an improvement from Tekken 1 and 2, which both ran on the System 11 board. The characters were also animated using motion capture technology, and these animations are still amazing as a result. Haorang, for example, is performed by Su Il Huang, a Taekwondo master. While this footage is very low quality due to it being super old, you can see how Haorang's movements look pretty much identical to how they appear in the real world. Most famously, however, is King's motion capture artist, Minoru Suzuki. Oh yeah. This guy is a legendary Japanese wrestler and MMA fighter, and a lengthy quote from Tekken figurehead Katsuhiro Harada explains how the motion capture for King worked. During the development of Tekken 3, we've tried many animation captures, and Minoru Suzuki was one of them. He gave us ideas for all kinds of throws and throw combos, as well as capturing King's stance. Also, the arm lock suplex wrestling move that Michelle and Julia perform was originally invented by Minoru Suzuki in the real world and taught to female wrestlers. Incidentally, at that time, the technology was called magnetic capture, not optical capture, and Minoru Suzuki was performing King's moves with a large number of spaghetti-like cables attached all over his body. By the way, this is a side note, but the weakness of magnetic capturing is that it not only restricts the actor's movements and it's not very accurate, but it is literally heavily influenced by magnetism, so it did not work at all just because a train was passing by. It was even affected by all kinds of large vehicles and radio waves, which made it very difficult to record the data properly. At that time, Minoru Suzuki taught us, Tekken Project, a lot about the physical and mental aspects of being a fighter. One day I asked him, "Ground techniques have become popular in recent years, and I often see fighters losing consciousness due to chokeholds in fights. How is it possible for a fighter with such a thick neck to fall so easily?" I asked. Minoru Suzuki told me that the best way to learn is to experience it, so I decided to experience his techniques at Namco's animation capture studio. His choke easily knocked me out as I watched the second hand on my watch. I thought I had fallen asleep for 20 or 30 minutes, when in fact the clock had ticked forward only 8 to 10 seconds. It was an amazing experience. That's right, Harada was choked out by arguably the best Japanese pro wrestler who ever lived to learn how to make King's techniques more lifelike. Now that's dedication. Aside from its animation, Tekken 3 is also known for its soundtrack. Composed as a duo by Nobuyoshi Sano and Keiichi Okabe, the two wanted to slow things down a bit and go into a more big beat direction. Harada didn't really get this decision at first, but Sano managed to convince him that it'd work out fine. Apparently, there's a story that involves a game tester on Tekken 3 who would complain about the music, and said Sano and Okabe should have tried to mimic the music found in Virtua Fighter, which really pissed Sano off, and it caused him to dismiss that tester entirely. Developing the game for the arcades was one thing, but getting it to run on the PS1 was a whole other story. Namco spent 8 months porting the game over to the console, and as the System 12 board was more powerful than the 11, having to port over the game proved to be quite a challenge. The PlayStation 1 had less RAM and a lower clock speed than the arcade cabinet, so the game's character models had fewer polygons, the backgrounds went from full 3D stages to 2D panoramic images, and the game overall runs at a lower resolution. The difference in stages is easily noticeable in the game's iconic intro movie, as it's quite obvious that the characters are inside of a box of sorts on PS1. After 8 months of hard work, the team was able to get the game running really well on the system, and I assume they celebrated in typical Japanese fashion, meaning they got really drunk and did some super loud and obnoxious karaoke.
I wanted to dig inside my skull and scrape out the pain.
Due to Tekken 3 taking place 20 years after Tekken 2, only 6 of the characters from the previous games return, and they are Anno, Heihachi, Jack 2, Lei, Nina, Paul, and Yoshimitsu. Fan favorites like Bruce and Kazuya don't show up in Tekken 3, so this game is sort of like Street Fighter 3 in that regard, where it prioritizes new characters over returning veterans. Tekken 3 has 21 characters in the arcade, and 23 if you count Dr. Boskonovich and Gon in the PS1 port. Due to Tekken 3 running on better hardware, it looks way better than Tekken 2, and all the animations are much more fluid. From Jin's karate, Horang's taekwondo, Julia's Bajichuan, and Kuma's bear-style MMA, all of the characters look, sound, and play differently, which is precisely what you want in a fighting game. Tekken 3 is also known for introducing the sidestepping mechanic into the series. While some characters like Tekken 2 Kazuya, for example, could move along this third axis with some of his movement tools, every character in Tekken 3 can now sidestep to their heart's content, adding a whole new layer of strategy to the game. However, there is no sidewalking, that would come later on, so going back to this game and not being able to sidewalk at all threw me for a loop at first. Also, instead of having access to a moon jump, characters now jump like normal humans, or grizzly bears in Kuma's case, if they can even jump, I don't know. Other additions to the game include faster ground recovery and more ways to escape tackles, just to name a few. In my opinion, a lot of the really basic stuff that we take for granted in modern Tekken games comes from Tekken 3, and even though sidestepping has been heavily nerfed in some of the more recent entries, it obviously wouldn't be Tekken without it. This game also doesn't have Rage, a combo extender tool like bounds, screws or tornadoes, and it also lacks the heat system, thank god. But another thing it's missing is walls. That's right, Tekken 3 came out during a time where every arena was an infinite stage, meaning you couldn't bully the opponent at the wall like you can nowadays. Tekken 3 still has insanely strong characters like Ogre and Jin who can dominate just about any opponent, but at least we don't have to deal with them at the wall. When it released, Tekken 3 hit the world with a massive wind god fist of awesomeness, and it's not an exaggeration to say that everyone loved it. It currently sits at a 96 on Metacritic, making it one of the best reviewed games of all time, and the review scores from outlets are either perfect or nearly perfect. Tekken 3 was also the highest grossing PCB arcade game of 1997 in Japan, and was the second highest grossing arcade game overall in that year in Japan, losing only to Virtua Fighter 3. The game also sold an estimated 35,000 cabinets worldwide, but these numbers were nothing when compared to how it sold on the PlayStation. On its Japanese launch day, it sold over 1 million copies in 24 hours, and according to the now defunct American marketing research firm PC Data, Tekken 3 made $48,500,000 in 1998 alone. If this wasn't impressive enough, Harada revealed on Twitter many years after the game came out that Tekken 3 had sold a total of 8.36 million copies on the PS1, making it a sales juggernaut. When it comes to discussing how reviewers felt about games in my videos, I normally read out a bunch of quotes to use primary sources like the historian I am, but there are simply way too many for me to do so this time. All you need to know is that the entire gaming world loved Tekken 3, and everyone raved about every little detail in this game. Another feature that fans and critics loved is the iconic Tekken Force mode. Presented like a 2D beat 'em up, this mode is only 4 levels long, and it's how you unlock the aforementioned Dr. Voskonovich. I've played through Tekken Force quite a few times, and it's a really fun mode, so I totally understand why people loved and still love it. If you couldn't tell by now, Tekken 3 had a lot of hard work and imagination poured into it, and the game's improvements over its older brothers, Tekken 1 and 2, caused it to be the golden child of the original trilogy. Characters like Jin, Xiaoyu, and Hwoarang all appear in modern Tekken games, and it just wouldn't be Tekken without them, you know? I never played Tekken 3 as a kid, so I have no nostalgia for it whatsoever. I was instead raised on Tag 2, and even I can tell you that Tekken 3 is fantastic. If your game has beach volleyball, Gon, and a playable panda, then it's probably going to be a banger. Thanks for watching, and I hope you had fun.